Anyone who already knows about the Route 53? Anurag, Vinay, Rajeshwari.
Route 53 is for, uh, oh God, I forgot. I'm sorry.
Okay. Rajeshwari, do you know about Route 53?
Uh, yeah,
Oh,
I
yes, yes,
got
yes.
to Route 53. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's for domain name resolution, right? For
Yeah.
making sure that the machines can access the internet, right?
Yes, yes. And Vinay, what about you?
No money. No money, I don't have an idea.
Okay. So basically, Route 53 is a service by AWS which is used for DNS purpose. And also you can buy the domains from Route 53, but let's talk about the DNS first. So before we start, like, do you guys have any idea what actually DNS is, like how it works, why we need DNS? Anything that you want to share? Anurag, I think you know about DNS.
So uh, when we type in www.google.com, so that is not what the server sees. So it is going to convert to the IP address. So that is where the DNS comes in. So it takes care of the resolution. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I will be giving the brief in a little more deep. So why the DNS concept is there? Because when the internet was introduced, okay, in that time there was only way to communicate from system to system, and the way was IP addresses. Without IP address, you cannot communicate with any system over the internet. Doesn't matter the system is placed wherever over the internet. Even if the system is your nearest system, that's your own another PC which is like placed on another room. If you want to communicate with that PC, again you will require the IP address. If you guys have ever used the tools or the applications to share the data, like there was an application called Share It. I guess it's still on Play Store. Not sure about that. There was an application called Zender, right? And there was one more application. Like, we have multiple applications nowadays in the market. So what these applications actually do, these application also uses the IP address to communicate from one device to another device. So if there is any device which is connected to the network, so the device can only be detected or identified by the IP address. So IP address is nothing but it's a logical address of the device. So there are two types of addresses on a device. One is logical and the second one is physical. Physical means the MAC address. And in the term of telecommunication, when we talk about the GSM or the SIM card connections, in that case, we have IMEI numbers, which are also called as the physical address of that particular mobile number. Mobile phones also have the MAC address. They are not limited to the IMEI number. IMEI number is just for the you can say SIM module. But whenever we have multiple, you can say NICs or multiple network cards in our device, then we will have multiple MAC addresses as well. So even when we talk about the laptops, in one laptop we may have multiple MAC addresses. For example, in your laptop you have Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi will have its own, like you can say, MAC address or NIC card. Okay, has its own NIC card, right? So when we talk about the Bluetooth, this is also connection device. Okay, and when we talk about the uh, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, LAN cable, right? The Ethernet port, you can say ETH, Ethernet port, that also has a different NIC card, and on that NIC card, the MAC address is written. So in my case, I have three devices or three ways to communicate to the wireless or wired network. So I will have three MAC addresses, okay? And if I have any more model, what I will say, the modem or anything which allows me to connect to the internet, that also product or that thing will also have a MAC address or along with the NIC card or the, you can say, interface, network interface card. So we talked about the IP addresses and the MAC addresses. Now, when it comes to the IP addresses, we have two sections of IP addresses. Number one is the private one, like till we discussed about the private one and the public one, right? While working with the AWS. Now, the work of DNS is actually to resolve a name into the IP address. The reason why we have DNS in the picture is because people cannot remember the IP addresses only. If I give you the IP address of Google and if I give you the IP address of Facebook, and similarly I give you the IP address of thousands of websites, you cannot remind them or you cannot remember them, right? Because the human psychology says that you cannot save numbers or you cannot remember numbers, and you can remember actually the names. That's why we have the domain name service. And it's a good way of marketing as well these days. If you want to do the marketing of your any website or anything, if you are doing that through the IP address, that's not a good way, right? For that, you have to buy a good domain name. So that domain name will be representing that IP address in the backend. So nobody knows the IP. They just use the domain name to represent their product or to represent their website or web application. Now, how it actually works. Okay. For example, we have this is our client. So Adarsh, we just started and we are talking about the DNS. Okay.
Okay, Manish.
So this is our client and this is our server. Okay. Now, for example, the server is Google server. So for example, google.com is the server. Okay. Now let's remove the google.com first because this server will only have the IP. For example, we are sending request to the google.com. We are sending a request on on google.com. So what will happen here, like we cannot communicate with the Google directly through the name, right? We need the IP address of this server. Now in this case, or you can say in this flow, there are multiple components or multiple devices will come in the path, right? Now, firstly, the device that will come in this like whole map is your own browser, the browser that I am using currently, the Firefox or like Chrome or Internet Explorer, any browser. So sometimes whenever you visit a website for the first time, your browser also saves the DNS or the IP address of that particular website so that it can give you a quick response, sometimes in the cache or sometime in the metadata in the form of cookies. It keeps the DNS information or you can say the IP directly on the browser end so that it can give you a response very quickly. But for example, if browser doesn't knows about that domain name, it's also a new domain for the browser. So what the browser will do, browser will send the request to the nearest, like you can say router or the device. It can be a Wi-Fi router, it can be any device, right? And now the DNS resolution depends on that particular device. For example, that's your home router. Okay, that's a Wi-Fi router. Now DNS resolution depends on that Wi-Fi router. For example, you are five people in one house and anybody else in your house, someone else in your house is using the same website. So maybe your router knows the IP address because here the router also works as a DNS sometimes and it also keeps the record of the traffic which is flowing. So sometimes the router also knows about the IP address, and if the router doesn't knows about the IP address, it will find for a server in the local area first. It will find for a server in the local area first, and the server should be DNS server. So how we can identify that this server is a DNS server? Because DNS server works on the port 53. Remember that. Whenever we talk about the port 53, that means DNS server. And that's why we have the name Route 53 specifically for AWS service, right? So the port number will be 53. That means that's a DNS server. Okay, so it will search for a server in which the port number 53 is open and which has the information like where DNS server is working. Now, for example, you have hosted a local DNS server, then definitely it will give you the information from that server. If the server is not in the picture, so what it will do now, it will send your request to the another router. Now, another router means the router which is nearest, that will be the router of ISP, which is the nearest one. That can be the home router or any router, like the router outside your house or any router, which is the nearest one. If that router knows the response, otherwise now the request will be sent to the name server or you can say the DNS resolver. Okay, when the nearest router doesn't knows about the response or the IP, then the request will be sent to the DNS resolver. Now here in the picture, you can also on the place of DNS router, sorry, this router, you can also directly put the ISP. ISP means Internet Service Provider. For example, Geo is the ISP for me right now. Maybe Airtel is the ISP for you. So that's the Internet Service Provider. Okay. So Internet Service Provider, why I'm talking about the Internet Service Provider and why I talked about this router here in the picture. Sometimes the request is directly routed through the routers. There is no role of physical ISP over there. But when we talk about the networks, we consider ISP. We sometimes we on the place of router we say that this is the ISP because that's just a device which is working as a routing for the routing. Okay. Sometimes we consider that device as the ISP because it is planted by the ISP. Okay, the Internet Service Provider. Now the request will be sent to the DNS resolver. Now this DNS resolver, okay, DNS resolver will send the request, for the particular IP address. If the IP address is not there, it will send it to the name server. Now the name server is basically the place where the mapping is done, whole mapping. Mapping means google.com means this IP, like any IP I can say, something like something this. Okay. So this kind of mapping is done on name servers. And also when the DNS resolver, even if there is no entry here, we also have a root DNS server. Root DNS is also known as the dot server, dot, which also has the information of the domain names and the IP mapping, which also resolves the name. After getting the IP address, it sends request back to the no, not right now back. It will send the request. It will forward the request through the internet and to the server. Also, it will send the information of this IP address to the client as well. That's why whenever you will try to open any website for the first time, it takes time in reload. You guys know that, right? Nowadays, we are using the fiber connection, so we don't notice that kind of time gap. But initially, whenever you're going to use any new device and you are opening a website for the first time, it will take few extra seconds to get the IP address, right? So this is how DNS works actually. Now, yeah, it's a huge process just to find the IP address on the behalf of a name. You guys got the concept?
I, I'm not clear, Manish. I have several doubts.
Sure.
So my first doubt is that I know you are trying to talk about the DNS service on the perspective of our personal computer rather than Route 53. So when
Yes.
you say server, does that mean we need an actual physical server? Is it like installed on our machines for doing the resolution, or is it like on the internet? And like where is this process taking place?
Okay, this DNS server, right? So what
DNS and then the name resolution and then the third one as well.
exactly. So what happens? There are few authorities who have set it up these kind of servers. The you can say public servers which are open to everyone. Now, internet is nothing but it's a connection of interconnection between the computers, right? So we have the authorities like INA and multiple authorities who have worked on the who work on the networks, who work on the IP addresses. So those kind of authorities have set it up these kind of stuff, which helps you to resolve the IP addresses and work the on the DNS, right? So if you search for the root DNS server, like for example, we can say root DNS server list. As I told you, INA, Internet Assigned Number Authority. INA is the authority, right? Who manages that kind of service. Now, this is the list of root DNS servers. So, this is the authority who has set it up everything. This is the authority who even assigns the IP addresses. Because as you guys know, when it comes to the IPv4, we have limited number of IPv4 addresses, around I guess 4 billion or 5 billion. I guess it's in billions, right? And because of the population is growing day by day, that's why we have the IPv6, which is even like the range of IPv6 is very high. So that's why. And this is the authority who manages the whole stuff related to the internet, related to DNS as well. So these are the DNS resolver servers. You can say root DNS servers, which helps us to resolve and the, where you can say, domain to IP addresses. These are the root one that I talked in the ending, the dot, you can say. This is the last.
I have I have one question. Sorry, Manish.
Yes, yes,
Like uh, as you said, we whenever we are accessing any server, we are going like internally. It's going through some steps, like some it's
exactly.
a yeah. So is this like when you are launching one server, we have to set all those parameters, or it is like an automatic process?
Look. For this point of view, guys can completely disconnect the concept from AWS. Okay, never don't connect this concept with the AWS right now, because DNS is a completely, you can say, huge topic and a separate topic. In AWS, we are using this kind of technology, you can say. And when I'm talking about this, the concept like setting up the DNS and working like this, it's not that we have to set up this. This is already set it up.
So it means everything is AWS is managing internally. So we have to just launch the
No,
server.
no. AWS is not managing the internally. For example, you are using your laptop, right? You are accessing Google. This is the process which is happening in the background. This is the process which is automatically happening in the background, the DNS name resolution, right? Which is happening in the background. That's why you are able to access the internet, right? That's why you are able to go to the google.com. And here the server is the google.com. Now, Google did nothing. Google just registered the domain name, nothing else.
Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, so whenever you're going to register your domain name, then that means you're going to register your domain name with the IP address, right? Because you have a physical address, or sorry, logical address for your system. That's why the I mapping will be done. Okay, I will let you know how the mapping is done. We will talk that in depth that as well while we will be talking about the Route 53. But this is the concept of the DNS only. And as you guys can see, I talked about the dot server, which is the last stage. If there is nothing on the dot server, that means that website actually doesn't exist on the internet. It's clear. Okay, or you can say on that layer, particular layer of internet, because again, internet is a very deep dive thing. We cannot dig like in the internet like this. There are many more stuff which is not even on the root DNS servers, but that's on the internet. So as you guys know, internet has multiple layers, and we only access few. We are on the topmost layer of the internet that we access in our day-to-day life. We can say 10 to 15% of internet. We are only using the 10 to 15% of your internet maximum. Okay, so
Uh, Manish,
yeah,
before we move on, I'm sorry.
yes,
Just want to continue about talking about DNS. So I understood what you were explaining about this third-party IANA.
yes,
So just to clarify, so there are whenever we make a request, let's say google.com, so our browser in the background is communicating with all of these entities to
exactly,
translate the request, and then it is saving as a form of cookies in the browser. And if
exactly.
we don't save it, then it does that every time. Okay.
Yes. So you can test this directly if you open an incognito mode in your system, which will not use the history, which will not use the bookmarks or any cache of your system. What it does, it takes time to load the websites, right? It's a very simple thing. If I open the incognito mode here right now, uh, private window, okay, in the Firefox, that's called private window. And if I open the google.com, as you guys can see, like right now, it's very fast. So it's very difficult to notice the gap. But yeah, there is some gap, a very minor second, because the internet connection is very fast, so I'm not able to get that. But whenever you will be opening the websites, you will face some kind of issues, because you guys will see this difference when you are using the slow internet connection, basically, where you will notice the gap. Like if you guys are from the generation of 90s, right? You guys were in the 2G connections as well. You guys have used 2G as well. So as you guys know, the internet was very slow in that time. But when we opened the google.com, it opens quickly. And when we are opening the google.com for the first time, it takes time, right? You guys have experienced that earlier, okay, the past days
Yes.
when you were working with the 2G or the 3G connections, right? After 4G, everything is very fast, so it's very difficult to understand. Also, remember that I told you the whole path to got to the dot, but it's not necessary to travel whole path. Sometimes it will find the IP here, sometimes it may find the IP in the middle of the path, right? Because it's just a communication way. Like if any, it will try to find the IP from multiple. It also sends the request to multiple servers to get the one information. This is how internet works. For example, if I'm searching for any website on the internet, what happens? My request is sent in on thousands of, or thousand is very less number, right? You can say multiple systems to get the results. That's why we get the results in very quick way. So this is how it works. It's not a very short thing. It's a very huge, you can say, even you can't imagine how long it's spreaded, right? Because it's the internet, and internet is a very deep thing. But the DNS works like this to identify the IP address. You guys got the concept?
Yes. Thank you.
Vinay, Adarsh.
Yes, Manish.
Yeah,
Okay.
got it. Nice.
All right. Now let's talk about the Route 53 now. Now you guys were a bit confused like how we will be doing this in Route 50. Also, like one more thing, you guys were talking about this DNS like we set up this DNS by ourselves? Like when it comes to the private organizations, yes, they set up their own DNS server, right? The reason to set up the own DNS server is because, for example, you're working in a private organization and the organization infra is huge. Like you have more than, you can say, 20 or 30,000 people working in that organization. It's a very simple concept. You guys know about the host name, right? Do you guys have any idea about the host name? Yes or no?
Yeah,
So
like
tell
we
me
have to
like,
make multiple hosts. Like in I have idea about in like as I'll say in Ansible we have
The development
like
server.
we'll launch multiple server like it's like a client server and master server. So there we have to in master server we have to add some host like master can know like which host he can access.
okay.
For that reason yeah.
So basically, host name, I will tell this in very short way. Host name means the name of your system. Like if you just fire the host name command, host name, you will get the host name of your system. That's the name of my system, right? And your system is identified by this name. Whenever you connect multiple systems in the network, every system can be identified by the host name. And again, it's the same thing. Host name is mapped with the private IP address of your system. That's why you are able to identify with the host name. So, for example, you may have seen this concept in your organization, or if you guys are have studied in a college or a school, if you have seen the lab of a school. In the school, what they do, they have multiple systems, or in a computer lab, they have multiple systems connected to the LAN wire, right? They use the wired network over there, and every system has a name. That's a host name. They say PC1, PC2, PC3, PC4. If somebody wants to send the data from PC1 to PC2, they can directly just type the host name. And in the Windows, we have the sharing center. Like we can share the data from here to there directly through the LAN, right? Using the wired connection over the network. We can also do that through the Wi-Fi. But in the colleges, we have done this using the LAN. And if you guys have played the games, like I was a CSGO player earlier, Counter Strike player. So what we do actually do in Counter Strike, we do play that game through the LAN cable, right? Again, we are using the IP addresses for the communication. You guys may have played the Need for Speed as well. Again, in the game, we can play that through the LAN cable. So these computers communicate through the host name and host name resolved into IP address. So on the background, they are communicating through the IP address. But for the foreground or the information that we see is that both systems are communicating through the host name. So it's the same thing. Now, when I told about you can set up your own DNS, that means if your organization is very huge organization, to identify system by system, you can set up that system by system is server by server as well, not these personal computers. I'm talking about machines. To create the communication between the machines, you can create your own DNS server, and you can change the DNS settings on every machine. Like whenever you're going to find this IP address, the DNS server is the DNS server IP address is this. So whenever there will be a request to identifying, for example, google.com, and if I have a private DNS server set it up in the network, so it doesn't matter the IP address, what is the actual google.com. It will send the request to the google.com, which is mentioned in the nearest DNS server, right? You can also do the DNS overriding here. So even I can create the manish.com in the DNS server, and it will send the traffic to the server IP address which is mapped with the manish.com in that DNS server. Doesn't matter if that server exists or not, or is the server is the internal server or not, or the private server or public server. Okay, so yeah, DNS server are used like this. So similarly, when it comes to the security, there are few attacks which are done through the DNS. In those attack, what happens? For example, this is a Wi-Fi router. The hacker starts attacking or changing the DNS, spoofing the DNS, starts spoofing the DNS in the Wi-Fi, and the server or the device of hacker acts as a DNS server, which is not actually a DNS server. It's a fake DNS server. Now, anybody connected to this Wi-Fi, whenever searches for the Facebook.com, it automatically redirected to any other website or any other server which is created by the hacker. This is called DNS spoofing. Okay, this is called DNS spoofing, where a hacker actually redirects the request using the fake or malicious DNS server to another website or another IP address. And the people think that they are connected to the actual Facebook.com, but they are actually connected to the fake Facebook. This was a very popular attack that people used to do, right? To get their ID passwords of the Facebook or any other social media. So in that case, they use the fake DNS servers. Now, this can't be done these days because now our devices are very smart. They can identify the malicious attacks, and also they can identify that the server is original or not. There are few points checks that verifies the server is genuine or not, as well as they can also verify the website as well, like this website is original or not. There are few checks over there as well. Okay.
Manish, sorry.
Yes.
Uh, can you please repeat who goes to the DNS server? Is it our router? Is it our ISP? Is it our machine? Is it our browser? I'm confused a little about this.
You send the request, right?
Yeah, but
Sending the
what
request
part?
means you search for the google.com, right? Now the
Yeah.
request will be traveling from your browser, okay, to the nearest router of the ISP, through that nearest router to the DNS server, if there is no other router involved in between the path. Like you are sending the request, and request is traveling from device to device. The same request is traveling from device to device, and through the DNS server, after getting the IP address, the request will be sent to the google.com. Also, it will send the information like this is the IP address of google.com to your system. So the next time your system should not will not travel this long to identify the IP address of google.com. You got it?
Yes, understood. Thank you.
Okay. So now let's talk about the Route 53. As the name suggests, we have the 53 in the name. So this was the basically logic of creating the Route 53, because it's a kind of DNS service which helps us in resolving the name and also helps us to perform a lot of tasks in AWS. And seriously, Route 53 has completely changed the use of AWS, because using Route 53, you can host a website or map stuff very easily without like getting confused on the different kinds of websites like GoDaddy or any other website which provides the domain service and also the DNS services. So let's talk about the Route 53 now. So Route 53 service you guys can directly find here. Route 53, here is the service. And also you can create the private DNS over there, but we will be talking about the basic services of Route 53 that you guys will be using in your scenario. And again, Route 53 charges a lot, right? If you want to perform the DNS management, traffic management, availability monitoring, domain registration, right? We have multiple services here in Route 53. Now, for example, you want to purchase a domain name for your website. You can also do that using Route 53. Now, I want to check the availability of the domain. Okay. So, availability means if I want to buy manish.com, it's not necessary that manish.com is available for me, because as you know, google.com is only name, right? You cannot purchase the google.com. It's only also purchased by Google, right? It's already purchased by Google. Even you cannot buy the facebook.com. So that's why you have to decide a domain name which is actually unique, or even you can add something special in the domain right? For example, if facebook.com is purchased, right? Maybe facebook.in is free, but again, facebook.in is also purchased by Facebook. For example, manish.com is purchased. Maybe manish.co.in is free. Free means available. Free means that you don't have to pay charge. It's not like that. You have to pay charge for the domain. Domains are not free actually. Free means it's not occupied. Okay. So let's check for the manish.com. So here you can check for the domain. Let's check the eligibility. Like, is it available or not? And as you can see, not available, status unavailable, but it has multiple options available here, and you can see the charges, right? $11 per year. Remember about the charges. Okay, you have to pay for the domains are not free, basically not free on AWS. If you want to buy a free domain, we have multiple websites. You can buy the free domain from there, but the domain name will not be as good as you are looking. Like, you will not get the .com, you will not get the .in, even .co.in will be not be available. Like, we have a website called Free Gnome, which provides you domain for free for 1 year basically. After 1 year, again, it will ask you to pay something. So I can search for the domain here. If I search for the Manish, MANISH .ga must be available if it is available. So as you guys can see, .tk, .ml, .cf, .gq, nothing is available. .com is priced at 8 USD here in Freenom. It's a .com, it says available. Wow. Freenom is selling .com basically, and here it says .com is not available. So sometimes this also happens, but don't trust on Freenom. Basically, it's not a trusted website to purchase a domain. If you want to actually purchase a domain, you can buy through the Hostinger, you can buy through the GoDaddy, or multiple websites are there to buy the domains, which are like trusted places to buy a domain, and you will can get it in 300 or 400 per month basically. And if I want to buy something as test AWS route, okay, and as you guys can see, .tk is available for test AWS route.tk. You can buy this one, get it now, and that will be completely free. I'm not going to perform this checkout process. You guys can easily do that. No need to apply the card. You can directly get the domain for free. But you have to park the domain to the Route 53, and for that, Route 53 is going to charge you. If you don't want to park the domain in Route 53, domain parking is also a concept. I will tell you about this later. First, let's talk about the domain. Okay, then we will talk about the domain parking. Why I said the domain parking here. Now, as you can see, choose a domain. We can buy the domain from here as well. If you want to buy any domain, just like I said, test AWS route. And if I check for the availability, as you can see, test AWS route is available, and you can get this domain in $5 as well per year. Now remember this. And as you can see, the domain name will be test AWS route.link. Okay, you guys can buy this domain as well. So it's very cheap here. Right now, we are not going to buy any domain. So here you can buy the domain. And after this, let's talk about the DNS management here, which is the most important one after the domain concept. Okay. Now, why we have the DNS concept here? Because after creating the domain, right, you need to map that domain with the IP address. You got the domain, right? For example, the domain name is manish.com. Let's take the example, right? Now your task is to map this domain with any IP address or resource where the website is working. Now what it can be, like for example, you guys remember we hosted a website. Basically, that was not a website. We just hosted a HTML page on the Nginx or Apache where we just we kept the default page most of the times, but we also write some data over there, right? The hello world or something like that. You can also host the whole website over there, and you can give the IP address of that whole system. But remember, the IP should be the public IP. Why? Because if you are providing the private IP, how it would direct the traffic to the private IP? It will not work, right? So the only condition is that should be a public and static one as well. But In the case of AWS, whenever we are using the EC2 instances, we get the public IP, which are static till we restart our server, right? So for the completely static IP, which should never change, we have to purchase the elastic IP, right? So here, let's just type the public IP only. So you should have a server with the public IP where anything is being served. There should be a web server running, Apache Nginx, anything, and the domain should be mounted over there. Now, there are two ways to point the domain to the server. Way number one, okay? First method. So, first method is that, like for example, you got the domain from the, you can say GoDaddy. Now, GoDaddy provides you to provides you a service to manage the DNS directly over there. There is no need to bring the domain on the AWS. It provides you service over the GoDaddy as well to manage the DNS. So what you can do, you have to create a record. Now the records are known as DNS records. Okay, you have to create a DNS record. In that DNS record, you will be mentioning. So here we have multiple types of records. For example, you want to point a domain, you have to create a record. Okay, we also have a CNAME record whenever you're going to create a subdomain. We have a MX record whenever you're going to create a like mail exchanger domain. Okay, so we also have the TXT records. Okay, so there are multiple types of domain name records. These are types of domain name records. You can get the information of all types of domain name records through the internet. It's very easy to learn. Okay, and also I will suggest you to learn one command as well of Linux, and the command is nslookup. It's a very important command. Remember that whenever you're mentioning that you have the knowledge of DNS, the interviewer is only going to ask about the nslookup only, and through the ns lookup you can get the as much as information about the DNS or the domains. It's a command, Linux command, which is very useful in the day-to-day life as well, because I'm working day-to-day in the servers, and whenever I want to identify the IP address, whenever I want to identify the details of a server like subdomain through the main domain or any information, I use this command in my day-to-day life. So it's a very important command. You guys can go through this one, and it's a Linux command basically, which is also available on Windows. You guys can use the NX lookup on Windows as well. Okay. So as I talked about these kind of records that you can create. So in our case, there is only one record which should be created, and that's a record. So in the A record, you have to mention the name. First of all, you have to mention the name, like how your server should be identified. So you can create a www record. www means you want that it should be a domain like www.manish.com. If you want to create it like info.manish.com, so you can say it's a front portion of your domain, right? The beginning of your domain. You can decide according to your use, because domain name is only manish.com. You can decide the beginning about the World Wide Web or info as per use, or tech.manish.com as per your requirement. Okay, it's just up to you. So here we can set the www. Okay, so .manish.com will be already there. Okay, after creating this, you have to mention the IP address, the public IP address of server. You can do the same entry directly on the GoDaddy. It will take around few minutes, like around 10 minutes basically. Also, we have to identify the response timeout time. You can response time, you can decide it as 60 seconds or something like that, and within 5 to 10 minutes it will start pointing to the server. So after this, whenever you will be opening the manish.com, it will point out to the public IP. Okay, this was the method one. Yes. Yeah, Anurag.
My question was, why do we pay the yearly fee for the having the domain name? Is it because they are like doing the translation for the domain name to the IP address? And if they can do it, can someone like buy their own server and do it themselves to not like to avoid paying for the uh, resolution?
Okay, so basically, whenever you buy a domain, what happens? You are registered with that name, right? You got the authority, you got the power of using that name. And even Domain name is very, very, you can say, powerful. Sometimes it helps in laws as well. Like for example, you purchase the domain, you are planning to do a startup, right? You purchase the domain name of that tech company. For example, you're going to launch a company called unrocktech.com. Okay, and you purchase the domain name. Now what happened? Somebody already opened that company. You got the domain, but that person opened the company. He started working with the name of unrocktech.com. Now you can sue him because you can prove that I got the name first. He stole my name. You can clearly prove that because you got the domain. So the domain can also work as that proof because it is also assigned by the authority. It's not a very, you can say, small or generic thing. It's also assigned by the authority. And even what can be done, like what people do, they purchase the domain names and they keep the domain names with them. For example, there's a person who has purchased multiple domain names, right? And for example, let's say
Yeah, I heard. And they used to sell by their
exactly,
own.
that's
Yeah.
called the
Yeah.
reselling of the domain. So, for example, I want to buy the manish.com, right? That's my need. I cannot, my work will not work done without manish.com because that's a name for me. That's my name. I want that to be a brand. So, I will be paying any amount for this domain, right? So, the person who holds the domain can also resell the domain. So, some people put the domains on resale on GoDaddy as well. It works like that. It's a name which is going to be sold from here to there. It's not a very small thing. It's a whole name, and it will be unique in the whole world. Remember that. Okay, that's why name is very important, and you have to pay for that. And according to the name, the charges will be high. If the name is like the important, the charges will be high. Remember that.
Okay, I'm sorry I'm increasing this, but my only confusion is that when we are paying AWS or GoDaddy for having that domain name, like what are they doing with the funds? Like why do they need the money? Is it because they are blocking that name for us, or is it because they have to give this money to someone else? Like there is a registry where all the domain names are saved. Like I mean, what is the charge for?
Look, the backend process is not a very small process. It's a very huge process. So whenever it comes to the domain, definitely there is a, you can say, authority which has the registry. You can say, like for example, you are buying a house, right? You have to pay the registration charge for that. You have to pay the taxes. Lots of amount is there, right? So it's same as that. Like what whenever you buy a house, what it does means like you are registering the papers on your name, right? As simple as this. So you are doing the same thing with the domain. There's whole authority which is working in the background, and they are taking the registration charges, the, you can say, taxes, a lot of things from you to maintaining that stuff or to assigning that stuff to you. So you are paying the rent, basically, you can say, to use that name.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
Okay. Now, this was the first method, and we have the second method when we talk about the Route 53. Now, in the first method, our server was hosted on AWS, and we purchased the domain from GoDaddy, and we directly routed the IP, and we are good to go. Now, here, there is no need to pay AWS more because your domain is hosted on GoDaddy, and you already paid to the GoDaddy for the domain, right? No need to pay AWS for anything. But yeah, I will talk about the disadvantages as well in the ending. Let's talk about the second method. In the second method, you can purchase the domain from the GoDaddy, right? Now you can park your domain on Route 53. Parking means your domain will be, like you can say, placed on Route 53 directly, and you will be managing DNS through the Route 53. You can understand it as like the DNS management will be done on Route 53, but the domain is purchased from GoDaddy. In this concept, what you have to do is you have to copy name servers of AWS to what we say GoDaddy DNS. It's like you are copying the name servers of AWS, like AWS provides you the name servers whenever you're going to create the hosted zone. We will talk about that. Like this is the hosted zone. Whenever you're going to create the hosted zone, in the ending, they will be providing you the name servers. and you can send there are few servers like 4 to 5 3 to 4 servers. You have to paste those named servers as it is on the GoDaddy, and your domain will be available here directly. Okay, and your domain name will be directly available here on the AWS, and you can manage the DNS on the AWS. Like now this time you can add this record, the same record, on the AWS. Also, because you are using the AWS, right? Because you are using the AWS, there is no need to provide the IP address. You can provide the load balancer, you can provide the IP, anything, because it's in the AWS, right? You can directly select the AWS resources over there as well. So that's the feature of AWS. Also, there is one more benefit is ACM. AWS also provides you the AWS ACM service for free whenever you are going to park the domain or going to use the domain from the AWS. Now, ACM stands for AWS, you can say, certification, or Amazon Certification Manager. I guess it's AWS Certification Manager, something like that. Uh, don't worry about the full form. You guys can check that on the internet, because yeah, I will just tell you the use of ACM. It provides you the SSL certificate for free. For free. And it's not free for 1 year, it's free for lifetime. ACM provides you SSL certificate free for lifetime if you have parked the domain on AWS. But remember that in this case, you paid for the domain on GoDaddy. Again, you have to pay for the parking, or pay the charges of the parking on AWS. You have to pay for the parking charges, and also that charges also includes the DNS management on the AWS as well. And it's giving you the ACM for free in that bundle. Okay, this is how this concept works, the method 2. And when it comes to the method 3rd, it will be very simple. Purchase the domain from AWS. By default, it will be parked to the Route 53. Now you have already purchased the domain. So I think I haven't done that earlier, but in that case, I have listened that you don't need, there is no need to pay the parking charges because you purchased it from the AWS itself, right? So also the ACM will be available for free. Now here in the above case, ACM is not available. So you have to purchase SSL certificate from GoDaddy, or you guys can use the Let's Encrypt certificate for free, but that certificate gets expired in every 3 months. So you have to keep updating the certificate in every 3 months. But here it's free for lifetime. Just apply once and use multiple times. So the second method is the best method, where you have to pay few charges on the AWS Route 53, but yeah, you will get the many benefits, right, for using the AWS. And always purchase the domain from GoDaddy because it's the cheapest one, and AWS charges very high, right? As you guys can see, we got the charges around the $11, $10, so it's very high as compared to the GoDaddy. You may find the domains for 300, 200 sometimes, and right now in the hostinger you can get the domain around 150 rupees only. Why on 150? Because Black Friday sale is going on. No promotions, okay? But yeah, I saw the ad, so that's why I told you.
Hi, Manish.
Yes, yes,
Sorry
Adarsh.
to interrupt.
No issues.
So, here are we using DNS as a Route 53 in AWS, or
Yes,
those
yes,
two are
yes.
different?
Where? Here, the first method.
No, are we replacing DNS with Route 53 in AWS, or
And the practical that we are going to do right now.
okay?
What are you asking? Like, I didn't
I
get
mean,
your question.
instead of DNS, are we using Route 53 in
Exactly.
AWS, or
No, no, no. Look. The DNS that we talked about earlier was a separate
yeah?
concept, which is a common one for any communication on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
The DNS
Yes.
that I'm talking right now is the entry only, the mapping of the domain name with the IP address, that mapping only. Okay.
Okay.
So that is
Good.
a DNS server. We are creating DNS record. Both are different things, right? We are just creating a record that you can say that
Got
record
it.
will be applied
Yeah.
on that server, right? So here we have the hosted zone. Like you guys can create the hosted zone in the Route 53, and remember that your hosted zone name should be same as your domain name. So for example, let's create it as manish.com. No issues on that. This will not work because I haven't purchased the domain. I'm just doing this for testing. Okay. And definitely you're going to create a public hosted zone because you want to access the domain publicly, right? You want to create a public domain. We also have a private hosted zone, but it is only for the within VPC network. Now you guys must be wondering why there is need of private hosted zone. It's same as why we need the private DNS. I told you about that. Whenever you're working in an organization, which is a huge organization, in that case, you will require the private DNS. Similarly, when it comes to the private hosted zone, where your application is a very huge application and you have multiple database servers, you have multiple, you can say, clusters, the multiple instances going on over there, and you want to perform the mapping or the communication. In that case, you also provide the domain name to your resources for internal communication only, not the external one. In that case, you can create the private hosted zone. For now, we are going to create the public one. Let's create the hosted zone. Now, as you can see, we have created the hosted zone here, and these two are the important entries. Remember that never do editing in these two entries because these are the very important one. The whole domain is going to work on these bases. And you guys can see here, the type of record is, the name of the record is manish.com, and the type of record is NS. NS stand for name servers. And these are the name servers that we got from here. So if you want to park your domain here, then you have to put these name servers on GoDaddy section. In GoDaddy, you will get the form option of domain parking. On that place, you have to provide these name servers. After that, that domain will be mapped here, and you can use the DNS from here. It will be working fine, or your domain will be parked here, right? So yeah, you can do this. Also, if you don't want to do this, there is no need to use the domain name. Like if you are using the second method, only in the second method you have to create this, right? Whenever you are using the method one, there is no need to use the Route 53. Why? Because we are using Route 53 for the DNS entries, not for the any other thing, right? In that case, you can directly put the IP address of server on the GoDaddy. So it's about the second method. Here, after creating this, you can create the records. As I told you, you can put the IP address here. So click create record here. And here we have the information, like providing the domain information. So as you can see, there are multiple record types. I talked about A. We also have 4 times A, CNAME, MX, TXT. Multiple record types are here. You guys can read about these record types on the internet. It's a very interesting topic. And it also comes in networking. So here you can put the information if you want to add, like for example, www can be added here. .manish.com is written on the ending. So no issues on that. If you want to keep it simple, direct, you can also do this as well. So let's keep the www.manish.com. If you want to put any IP address here directly, you don't want to select any resource, you can keep it simple. If you want to add alias, click on alias. Alias, now you can select the traffic here. What do you want to select here? For example, I want to select the uh, VPC endpoint S3 website. Like if you have hosted the static website on S3, you can also select that. You can select the application on classic load balancer. Choose the region. For example, the region is US East one, right? We are not using the North Virginia region. And here from here we can select the load balancer directly. So load balancer DNS will be selected here directly. After creating the records, the traffic will be directly redirected to the load balancer, and through the load balancer to the resources, right? So this is very useful in that case. And now right now we don't have any load balancer available, so you guys will not see any load balancer here. But if you have any load balancer in your account, you will see the options here as well. So you can select the any service of AWS. You can also select the VPC endpoints here, network load balancer, elastic beanstalk environments. Multiple services are available.
I have one doubt. Like, we can add multiple load balancer in one domain name, like single domain name.
First of all, your purpose should be clear what you want to achieve with that.
Suppose my organization domain having a one single domain name. In my organization, I have multiple servers. In
Okay.
my multiple servers, I configure more than one load balancer.
Okay,
So what is
so
it?
what you can do is you can create the domain name like this, manish.com. Now you can create the subdomains. Okay, for example, info, or you can say server one like this, server two. Server 1 will be pointing to another load balancer, server 2 will be pointing to another load balancer. In that case, you have to create the two records, and one will be default as well. So those records should be the CNAME records because you are creating the subdomains, okay? Like this. The domain will work like this. And it will be pointing to another, it will be pointing to another load balancer, right? You can use this. So yeah, you can go with the one domain. It's not necessary to buy multiple domains.
So we don't have to pay for server1.manish.com, right? Since we have
Exactly.
already paid for manish.com.
Exactly. This is how you
Okay.
can reuse the domain multiple times as a subdomain.
So right now we are using meet.google.com. So it's actually hosted on google.com domain, but
Exactly.
it is a subdomain.
They are only using the google.com, and there are multiple subdomains that we are using like mail.google.com, photos.google.com, contacts.google.com. Everything is google.com only. All those stuff are subdomains only.
Okay. So they also are paying to GoDaddy 11, $20 a year.
Basically, Google is not paying to GoDaddy. Google is a huge service. It can directly buy from the authority. It can
Oh,
directly receive it
okay.
from the authority. Google is a huge company, right? GoDaddy is nothing
Right.
in the
Yeah,
comparison
of
of
course.
Google.
That's why I was wondering that. Like
Yeah,
they also have to make the payments. Okay.
yeah, definitely they have to make the payment, but because you Google has its own GCP and lots of stuff, you can also buy the domain from Google in that case, like we are buying from the AWS.
Right.
So they directly deal with the authorities. They don't go with the like work on with the GoDaddy.
Understood.
Manish,
Yes,
I
yes.
mean, to whom the Google is paying? I mean, who is the authority here? And
Look, like Google has huge infra, right? Servers and
yeah,
lots of things. So maybe Google is communicating directly through the INA, the company who is managing the whole internet, where I talked about the root servers. And there can be more authorities as well. The back is it's a very huge network. And Google is one of the leading providers in the market right now, right?
okay,
So not sure about the exact authority because multiple networking providers are in the market. Even when we talk about the network providers, only providers, India, you guys only thinking on the level of Geo, Airtel, and that kind of stuff. But even there are multiple companies who are working far higher than these companies. Like there's a company called, I guess the company name is, you guys know about the ANT, right? AT&T.
Yes.
It's a very huge company. And what if we talk about the marine lines? Sorry, if we just talk about the marine lines or internet marine lines, sometimes we call them as submarine lines, or sometimes they are marine lines. So these are the fiber connections in the all over the world, right? Let me
yeah,
open a huge map. So here multiple organizations are there, AT&T, and I guess also ZT, what was the name? ZTE, I guess. It's also a huge organization which is working on the networking, which is working on the telecommunication and the networking, right? So not able to find the exact image, but yeah, you guys can see like the internet is completely wired. Internet is not a wireless network. Here it is. These are the marine lines you can see.
that means marine lines are the one of the authorities
No, no,
who
no.
maintain all this.
The companies who manages those marine lines, even they are not the authorities. Even they are connected to the authorities because it's not a game of for the one person or one organization, right? Managing internet
Yes.
is not the game of for the one organization. If it
Yeah,
was the game for the one organization, then Google is quite enough to manage that. Still, Google is not managing this. We have authorities called INA. Even like when we talk about the very little thing, you guys know about the SD cards, the memory cards, right? There is a
yeah, Manish.
specific authority for the SD cards, complete authority for that. Even when it comes to the Wi-Fi, there is a specific authority for the Wi-Fi, WLAN specifically. So when it comes to technology, this portions are divided into multiple authorities to manage every stuff. So networking is a very huge, even when it comes to technology, networking is a very wide thing, right? Fiber connections, wired connections, wireless connections, satellite internet, lots of stuff is going on currently in the market. In the satellite, you guys know about the Starlink, right? The concept of Elon Musk, the satellite network provided the Elon Musk Starlink company, right? He was planning earlier. Like if you guys have here the theories, if you guys have read the research papers of like past 10 or years or 12 years, satellite internet was never possible, because when we talk about the rotation of the earth and sending the signal from a satellite to the earth, it takes very long time to reach on the ground level, but
But
somehow
we
this
had
is
TV and
possible.
stuff, right? Like
Yeah, but
live broad.
TV
Yeah,
stuff is working there, but you remember, like in the TV stuff, we have to change the position of the antenna from here to there, and also there is some delay. If you guys remember
right.
earlier when
Yeah.
the live telecast of the cricket matches or stuff was going on, there was lot of delay in providing the signals. And sending these signals is not that difficult, but you are talking about the internet, which should be there. We are expecting very low latency. That was not possible directly because the distance from the surface and the, we can say, obstacles, number of obstacles which can come in the gap are is very high. So that was even not possible at that time. This was not even expected, but right now it's possible. So that's why everything is divided to different authorities, different organizations. And if there is something which is developed by one organization, sometimes those organizations can't even handle that technology. So they, you can say, donate it or remove the technology or give the technology to another organization or any open source organization, so that the, you can say, research can go on. For example, when we talk about the Hadoop, have you guys ever heard about the Hadoop? HADWP. It's a big data
Yes.
technology.
Yes.
So it's also an open source technology right now, but earlier it was created by the Yahoo, and few of the modules were created by the Google, and now it comes under Apache. Apache is the open source, you can say, organization who is currently handling this. Now Kubernetes that we are talking about these days is created by Google, and now it's open source and it's completely handled separately by the open source communities. Why? Because Google even knows, like, I will not be able to handle this much kind of stuff, and this thing requires the open source power. So that's why they transfer the technology from one organization to another organization directly. But the founder is the founder, right? The name is always stick to the founder. All right, let's come on the point again. We talked a lot about the stuff. So here you can select the resources and create the record. Okay, and the record will be created over there. Like for now, what I'm doing is I'm just removing the alias and I'm just typing the same IP which is written here, or you can type any other IP like 172.31.0.5, something like this. And let's create the record. The record will be created and it will look like this: www.manish.com, simple routing and pointing to this. This is how records are created. It will not work definitely because there is no server with this IP, there is no domain with this IP. Sorry, domain with this name. But yeah, we have created a hosted zone to test the functionality. You guys got the concept? Yes or
Uh,
no?
yes, I, yes. I have one question regarding the load balancers. So when you are working in production, and you said that in load balancer we can only have one type of machine. So what if you want to have Windows and Linux for the same DNS? So like you go for subdomains, or like what do you do in that situation?
Like you said, Windows and Linux. First of all, the scenario depends on the application. Why there is an application which is deployed on two different operating systems?
I'm not sure. I just thought if there is a
Yeah,
situation where
I can understand.
there's
Like you just thought about the stuff, like if the application is, if there are two servers, one is Windows, one is Linux, right? Doesn't matter. We only require the IP address, and there should be a web server program working on those servers, which must be hosting something. That's it. There is no relation with the
okay,
operating system.
understood.
Okay. Any other doubts? Any other doubts? Vinay, Adarsh, Rajeshri?
No, good. I'm
No,
good.
I got.
Okay. All right. So that all about the Route 53. You guys can do the practical, but remember that Route 53 is not a free service. Okay. If you are actually going to, okay, so it is not going to delete that domain because we have record set here, right? If we have record available here, we cannot delete the domain. Remember that. So let's delete all the records. Hosted zone. I selected the hosted zone, right? Oh no, no, no. Let me delete the record first. Delete record. And also managing this. Yeah, now we can delete the zone. Also remember, Route 53 is also a sensitive service. Whenever you're working on the production, never touch the Route 53 directly, because if you have removed any DNS record, that can impact the downtime for the whole production, because you have removed the connectivity directly from the domain, right? It's also a sensitive service. So always be aware of using Route 53 directly on the production. Now, let's quickly talk about the ACM, which is the AWS Certificate Manager. It's nothing but it's a service which provides you the free certificate or the SL certificate that can be applied with the load balancer or anywhere in the AWS, you can say surrounding, or AWS, on any AWS service. So directly what you can do here is request a public certificate after clicking on the request a certificate here. SL certificate are basically for the HTTPS. You guys remember we worked on the load balancer. I created a listener rule, and the rule was for the HTTP. We can also create a HTTPS rule, but on that point, we have to provide the certificate over there. So in that, if you have created certificate here, you can select this, you will get the drop down of the certificate on that listener rule for the HTTPS. So it's basically for the HTTPS. Now, first of all, you have to provide a fully qualified domain name. So you can directly type the domain name here. DNS validation recommended, but this validation is not recommended if your domain is on the AWS, right? It will be done automatically. No issues on that. Key algorithm that you are going to use for the uh, SL certificate. So SL is basically for the security purpose, the secure socket layer where there is this encryption stuff is going on in the behind. And in the encryption, we have to provide a key or the algorithm by which the encryption will be done. By default, we used to use this RSA2048. You guys can select any other encryption algorithm from here as well. After this, you guys can just click on request. After a few minutes, the certificate will be available. And anywhere in the AWS where there is a requirement of the certificate for the HTTPS, or there is any service which is providing you the HTTPS, definitely that service is going to ask for the certificate. You guys will get the drop down list and the certificate name will be listed over there. You guys can select the certificate directly from there and it will be working fine. But remember that if you have created a certificate for manish.com, for example, it will only be applied on this manish.com. It will never be applied on anywhere else. Okay, it will be only for this manish.com. Okay, got it?
Not for the subdomain name.
Yeah, subdomain name, definitely subdomain name will also work. Manish.com, like info.manish.com, that means it comes under manish.com, right?
Okay, okay.
Yeah, every subdomain which comes under that manish.com. Okay, the same certificate can be applied multiple times. Certificate will be renewed automatically from the AWS. No need to check that after creating once. But the only condition is that if your domain is parked on the AWS, this will be free for you. Okay, that was about the AWS certificate. There is no need of creating the certificate. It's just request and it will be available directly. If you guys have any other doubts, you guys can ask. Rest we are good for today. Like we have done Route 53 and the ACM concept.
Do we have session tomorrow?
Yes, tomorrow I guess is Thursday only, right? We will have session tomorrow.
Yeah, but it's a national holidays here, so that's why I just asked.
National holiday on there. Okay,
It's a Thanksgiving Day actually.
why on Thursday?
Thanksgiving Day used to be in Thursday, right?
Yeah. Okay. No, no, like the session will be on tomorrow as well. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.